Hey everyone. We have a great panel here today on the NFT space. Clearly, NFTs have captured the zeitgeist and taken hold in the context of culture. OpenSea surpassed 10 billion in volume. Coinbase had over 2.4 million signups to their new NFT wallet recently. But the underlying functionality of NFTs also represents some quite interesting use cases. The market infrastructure needs to be built in order for investors and participants to access the NFT market across the life cycle of a trade or an investment from pre to post trade. And here today, we have a panel to talk about just that: different perspectives, different backgrounds, ways in which they're working with the NFT space. So I'll give a quick introduction myself, and then we'll get into introductions from the panel. My name is Michael Sidgmore. I'm a partner and co-founder at Broadhaven Ventures. We're a fintech and crypto VC, invest mainly into companies, although we've invested into crypto funds in the space as well. 13 companies in the crypto space, 3 funds, including some unannounced companies in the NFT space, as we believe NFTs are going to be a big part of crypto's future. There's so much more here. So we have a panel that understands and works with NFTs from these various vantage points. So let's start off with introductions, and McKenzie, we'll start with you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm McKenzie Slaughter from Powerhouse Capital. We are a decentralized private equity firm. We are trying to bring digital transformation into the industry with blockchain, and we are doing this a number of ways. We are using decentralized governance and community building with a social token, our own house token. And we are also exploring different ways to kind of boost the DEI mandates, which is diversity, equitable, and inclusive mandates that private equity firms are facing with the use of NFTs and DAOs. My background is in fintech and alternative investments. I've been working mainly overseas, to build financial infrastructure and digital ecosystems in the Caribbean, Africa, and Asia Pacific.
Awesome. Jason, over to you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Jason Price. I currently serve as the Director of Global Regulatory Relations at Blockdaemon. I'm sure many of you, or maybe some of you, have not heard of Blockdaemon, but I'd like to take a quick minute and just tell you what we do. So Blockdaemon has been in business just shy of 5 years. We're a non-custodial platform that offers node operations and infrastructure tooling for blockchain projects. So our node management platform helps auto-scale blockchain networks securely with enhanced monitoring, backup systems, high availability clusters, APIs, and cloud-managed node monitoring. We offer full nodes staking validators for over 50 protocols, which allow our clients to scale quickly and securely. So for staking, we provide institutional-grade staking on over 25 networks, which allow our customers to stake independently through 2 different methods. The first is through our public validators. For certain protocols, this is a great option for our customers for protocols that have a high minimum staking requirement, such as Polkadot. And then we also offer our flagship white labeled validator node offering that allows you to brand as your own, but we provision, deploy, and manage those nodes for the customer. This is more favorable for our large exchange customers or crypto native platforms that wish to offer staking to their end customers, but outsource the complexity of running the validator nodes to us. And lastly, we have a superior API tool that allows customers to engage with multiple protocols called Ubiquity through a unified API, which is extremely helpful for engineers to not only to avoid having to recreate the wheel by building a new API every time that they interact with the new protocol. Our core customer base tends to be large crypto native companies, financial institutions, small, mid, and large size funds. Just recently in late September, we closed our Series B for around 155 million. That included some of the largest top investment firms in the industry who started as our strategic partners and now investors, which is a great segue into what I do at Blockdaemon and more on my background. So I lead the development and oversight of Blockdaemon's regulatory strategy and engagement framework. So since joining in March 2021, I've had the opportunity to support multiple business lines to include sales, where I filled in, the role of a technical account manager, research, where I co-led research efforts of new protocols. Blockdaemon sought to integrate within our product offering, and most recently, compliance, supporting our CCO and building out a robust framework. And part of that framework includes a regulatory strategy. I have just north of 12 years of experience across various fields, but mainly in emerging tech and risk management. And prior to joining Blockdaemon, I led a large team as a contractor for the government, focusing on blockchain analytics, tracking illicit activity and money laundering. And prior to that, I was in the intelligence field for the US government. And in my spare time, and I use that loosely, I give back by mentoring kids in my native city, DC, by showing them the importance of financial and technological literacy. It's a true passion of mine, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. Awesome.
Thanks, Jason. We'll have to get into the regulatory side. Glad we have somebody from a regulatory perspective. And I'm also glad we have somebody from McKenzie from the perspective of actually building a social token. So I think those should be two interesting perspectives. And I think a great transition to Duong, who is also building something that kind of bridges the traditional world and the DeFi world. So over to you, Duong.
Thanks, Michael, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Duong Phan, and I'm representing Bholdus. So at Bholdus, we are a blockchain dedicated to DeFi and NFT, leveraging on the property of the blockchain of having high transaction throughput. We can scale up to 10,000 TPS, and the security of the blockchain. So our blockchain is interoperable and cross-trained with various digital asset economies and DeFi networks. So we connect with Binance, Ethereum, Polkadot, etc. Because of those property, we aim to be the bridge between the real world assets and the crypto space. And we try to do it through multiple venues. First, to build up the infrastructure of the blockchain itself, and to support our startup and native crypto startup by doing launchpad, investment, incubator, governance, product development, and go-to-market. So our native token, BHO, we are listed on the MEXC, and really excited to see everyone today, and look forward to discussion about how we can leverage the NFT and applying it to real use cases and application.
Yeah, thanks, Duong. That's a great transition into what I want to get into, because yes, we know there's plenty of hype around NFT art, and to some extent, deservedly so, right? There is a reason why CryptoPunks are valuable, why Bored Apes are valuable, and the communities that they're building, as well as many others, have credence. But I do want to get to kind of how you all think various use cases for NFTs will unfold. How will people utilize NFTs, and what your viewpoints on the functionality for NFTs are? So why don't we start with you, and then I want to hear everybody's perspective, because you all come at this from different perspectives.
Yeah, sure thing. So, of course, I'm sure everyone have heard of NFT recently. Is really in interesting and emerging trends. But going back to the fundamental, why do we think NFT may have a lot of important use cases in the future? So let's go about the critical features of NFT itself. So the first property of NFT is that it's unique. It's not like Bitcoin or Ethereum, that every Bitcoin is the same, every Ethereum is the same, every dollar bill is the same. NFT is an unique piece of digital asset or digital information. Being unique is unchangeable still, because once the token issues, you just cannot change the information. So one NFT issue to represent an asset, you just cannot change the property of the NFT to change assets that it represents. It's transferable. Like, the nice thing about crypto is that it's global, it's 24/7. So there can be always demand and supply somewhere in the world for your NFT. And the most important thing from my point of view, besides the uniqueness, is that it's verifiable. So the ownership of the NFT is retained on the blockchain network and can be confirmed at any time. And the information about which wallet is a particular token in the public is really important as to how it can represent the art market right now, as you have seen, and it will have many other applications in the future. So I believe that the economy is heading toward tokenized assets. So every asset can be represented by an NFT. Of course, there will be a lot to be done in order for us to get there. So infrastructure regulation, to name a few. But I see some of the near-term application in certain industries that doesn't require a lot of regulation. So for example, entertainment that you have right now, the art, of course, entertainment, for example, the in-game item, characters in games, the experience in game. We can see some digital services, for example, education and travel platform can definitely leverage as NFT to represent certificate or represent the piece of ownership for certain services or assets. And there can be a lot of other applications. So I will stop here for the other panelists to discuss about it, and happy to answer any question.
Yeah, let's transition over to McKenzie. You're building a social token, so would love to hear your perspective on what you think the use cases for NFTs are and the functionality that maybe you see, as well as how you're applying it to the community that you're building.
Sure. So simply put, I personally think that NFTs are similar to Bitcoin in that it's a store of value, right? NFTs can be used, well, we're using NFTs in a number of ways. Since it is a store of value, you can store any kind of value on it. We're looking to store ownership of a company on an NFT. So that means your investors can actually invest in you and have a digital representation of what they've invested in. And they can also trade it in a secondary market a lot easier than some of the Web2 platforms that you see out now. And then we also want to we are also looking at NFTs from a deeper perspective of real assets, and not only digital assets, but real assets, and making sure that they can reflect or be properly registered and reflect the true value, as we have some values in the industry that are very overstated and not transparent. We have a lack of transparency in valuations in private equity. And that's kind of one of the big criticisms in the industry globally. So we are looking to kind of assist with that by establishing a registry for NFTs where companies can reflect their valuations, and then also access financial services. So secondary markets, DeFi, credit, establishing credit lending, and also having access to royalties. Royalties is not something that has really been explored in the private equity venture capital space, but it's something that we are looking to experiment with our portfolio companies.
That's fascinating. And given that you're building token for your community, how do you think about NFTs as entry into a set of experiences or things that people now have access to?
I think from an experience standpoint, it's a lot easier for any type of participant in the industry, whether you're an accredited investor or unaccredited investor, to be able to participate in investing or just having access to digitizing your value. So I think that it presents a big opportunity for inclusion, to include some underserved communities and even some creators, as you see right now with the art NFTs. Creators now have access to their value. It's digitized, and then they'll have direct opportunities to access financial services, and they can actually become an investor themselves.
Yeah, yeah, that's fascinating, and a great segue into Jason, where one, I think from the vantage point that you have at Blockdaemon, you're able to see kind of how people are thinking about NFTs, utilizing them. So we'd love to hear your perspective on what you think is kind of some of the functionalities behind NFTs and why they're valuable.
Yeah, so as Duong and McKenzie pointed out, I think we all realize that we're at the tip of the iceberg with NFTs. There are so many use cases beyond digital art, specifically around provenance and authenticity. A major problem today is counterfeiting, right? And things like supplements or medicine, and even items like specialty footwear, like Jordans, if you're a sneakerhead. NFTs can help solve this by tracking and tracing these products through the product lifecycle. So for example, imagine being able to scan a QR code of a nutritional supplement or that you bought online and seeing its entire journey from manufacturing to shipment. That's extremely powerful, right? This will also help expose products that are erroneously made and sourced in specific countries, because of, obviously the track record is completely transparent. Another great example is real estate. In fact, I think that real estate is probably primed to be the most ready to adopt NFTs, which can be used to simplify transactions, enable smart contracts for automatic payments, or even decentralizing the home rental process, all while maintaining best practices for security and privacy. There are, I think there's a number of numerous folks in the audience that have probably purchased or leased a residential or commercial property, and at some point thought to yourself, this is ridiculously cumbersome. Why doesn't someone make this process more efficient? And I believe NFTs can do just that very easily. Another good use case is academic credentials, right? Or professional certifications. NFTs can provide proof of attendance, degree, or certification earned. And I think it's important information that's tied to your identity. NFTs, as Duong indicated, is tied to your identity, right? You can store this information to the NFT, and it follows you around just like a normal piece of paper would, right? That you hang on your wall. So I think it's also important that NFTs, not only do they have native NFT native chain ability, if you will, but they also have cross-chain ability, right? Which allows them to be interoperable between multiple chains, which means you can take that identity and apply it to different dApps or different applications in different networks and ecosystems. These tokens can create immutable records for courses, right? Taking by issuing tokens for each course completed, along with verifying any degree or certification earned through a smart contract verification process. So I know there's something to be said about holding that piece of paper, right? A lot of people post their graduation degree on the wall, but I think in the near future, issuing a paper certificate for anything will be obsolete. And NFTs will be used as a record of academic achievement, and those tokens can even be transferred to other individuals, providing proof that the person holding it earned such an NFT.
Yeah, those are some great points, Jason. I want to expand on two of them. So one is, what needs to happen with development of cross-chain infrastructure in order to be able to kind of realize some of these use cases you have? And then I want to transition into kind of how this bridges to the world of traditional finance, given that many of the participants here at TAB may come from the traditional financial services world and are now being exposed to or working with the world of DeFi. So first, kind of what do you see in terms of development of cross-chain infrastructure that needs to occur in order for the NFT space to continue to expand and also have the functionality that you talk about?
Yeah, so we're seeing it now with IBC, and we're seeing it with other bridges that bridge networks together. There's other applications out there. One specifically, or network, is Evmos, right? It's actually a bridge for EVM, Ethereum, and I believe Cosmos. So there's a lot of networks that are building bridges to enhance the capability, not only to write smart contracts, right? So creating the functionality for smart contracts to be written on chain, but also once you enable smart contracts, integrating the NFT capability on chain. And that in itself allows you to transfer NFTs to different networks and use them how you wish. The second thing is, repeat the question for institutions. Sorry.
Yeah. So the second piece of this is, how do we bridge the worlds of traditional financial services and DeFi? So you mentioned something like tokenization of real estate assets as NFTs. I would love for you to walk through that and kind of where you see the opportunity there, because that is, I think we heard this on one of the prior panels, there is massive amounts of capital, I think $40 trillion equity and fixed income locked up in traditional assets off chain. How do we move some of that on chain?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think first it's about figuring out the usability, right? The use case. And I think we'll go over this later in the discussion, but figuring out, I think institutions need to get involved in two-pronged situation. First is investing. I think they need to create an infrastructure, right, where they're actually minting and getting involved in the minting of NFTs. And then second, I believe it's about figuring out the use case. So I know a lot of institutional players have various industries that they invest in, various businesses. So I would imagine that along those lines, they can figure out, some sort of enterprise, whether it's in the movie industry, whether it's in real estate, or it's in supply chain, and figuring out, okay, look, we are invested, or we are investors in FedEx, right? How can we mint NFTs to enhance supply chain? How is it being done today, and how will NFTs change it going forward? And I think those two things alone would allow institutions to get involved, because it's going to take some sort of investment on behalf of the institution to get involved. Not only they need to understand how NFTs are actually working at the ground level, like what does minting mean, right? And how do you start minting an NFT? How do you develop one? How do you launch one? And then second, creating that marketplace, it can allow them to sort of see, okay, great, this is how I create a marketplace around NFTs. Then second, it's really diving into the most noteworthy use case for their risk appetite, right? A lot of these might be a lot more risky than others. So they need to understand and figure out which use case is most applicable to them and then execute.
Yeah, that makes sense. And great segue into Duong. Would love to hear your perspective on building the bridge between traditional financial services and the world of DeFi, because that's what you're doing at Bholdus to some extent. So would love to hear your perspective on that as you think about kind of the development of NFTs and what needs to happen in order for those two worlds to be bridged together.
Yep, thank you, and thanks, Jason, for a great discussion point. So yeah, at Bholdus, we really focus on interoperability. So we are interoperable, and an asset that is issued on Bholdus can be moved with ease to other ecosystem and protocol. So one of the key features that we want to develop is to issue the on-demand assets for different businesses, purpose, and use case. So for example, once we have a partner, for example, in education, we can help them issue the NFT on our blockchain that can be easily verified using a normal link that it's just like LinkedIn, right? You go to LinkedIn and you click on it and you can see the certificate of someone achieving certain course or educational credit. But coming back to a more fundamental question is what will have to be built in order for NFT to really take off, not just within crypto, also in real life. I think there are three critical aspects. The first one is a technical aspect of it. Like Jason said, how can you mint an NFT? How can you trade an NFT? What infrastructure that need to be built to bridge between the crypto world and between the real world and the crypto world. The second is user adoption. So for certain industry, for example, traditional finance, mid-size regulation, but the slightly older demographic could make it kind of a barrier for people to adopt the uses of NFT or a more technical savvy solution at this point, and it may take some time for the curve to materialize. And the last piece, but also very important, is regulation. So real estate is a really nice case, and right now we are looking into it, but we really need to pick a jurisdiction in order for it to be legalized, for it to have a clear legal framework, for us to be able to tokenize a piece of real estate and to be able to offer it to investor and trader and buyer, right? So those are the three things that I think that need to be developed further. So we are really happy that we are trying to push forward a lot on the technical perspective and the user adoption perspective, and also jurisdiction one we closely follow. And we the nice thing about crypto is that you can really pick your jurisdiction and launch your product from the more user friendly and regulatory friendly jurisdiction.
That's great. I do want to get to our regulatory expert on the panel about how to regulate NFTs, but first I want to get to McKenzie on how, you've talked about building a network, you've talked about kind of building a decentralized private equity fund. How do you think about that in the context of where NFTs fit in? And how do you think about that in the context of tokenization of traditional assets? I think you're on mute.
Yes, within Powerhouse, we are using NFTs to kind of build out this network and build out this community. So kind of think of it as a pass, right? A membership pass, so you can get into our network of our network of
Work.
Yeah, sorry about that. I have a dog.
Someone wants to get into the network.
Yeah, our network of what we call value creators and investors as well, and capital partners and operating partners. All the things that will be traditionally all the things that are traditionally included in a private equity firm, all those people will need an NFT to get access into our network. And then once they get access into our network, they'll be able to do the normal things that, just like any other private equity firm, and help build value for our portfolio companies. And then they will get rewarded with a social token. So right now, what we're seeing in the industry is like, earlier this year, the social token, the community token did everything for communities that wanted to kind of replicate the venture capital fund or a private equity fund or acquire assets with a social token. Now, the NFT, the non-fungible token, has kind of trumped the social token. So we're trying to use both. So once you get an NFT, we're using our social token as a reward to reward our value creators, and then also to provide governance, right? So transparency and governance is such a big issue right now within private equity. So we're using the social token to kind of reward our stakeholders and trying to give them some kind of incentive to help us be more transparent, to help us be more diverse, inclusive, all these things, to be more impactful, make sure that our ESG risk tolerances are intact, and also climate as well. So whatever a firm's mandate is, that can be translated into rewards using social tokens.
And McKenzie, how do you think people should value these social tokens? It's easy for them to maybe understand how to value crypto art, right? And there are tools being built to help value that. There's Rarity tools, there's Curio, there's Nansen, there's a few others. Right. But that's relatively easy for us to maybe wrap our heads around in terms of being able to understand and assess value. Whereas a social token, it may have a price that somebody has to purchase at in order to be able to gain entry into your ecosystem. But then how should people think about valuing these tokens, given that there's some tangible aspects to that value, but maybe some intangible aspects as well?
Yeah, well, right now it's kind of like the wild, wild west. You just put a price to it, and people will just, they'll pay for it because they think they're missing out on something. So, but in a financial or traditional finance sense, you usually have appraisers, and I'm hoping that will come into this space sooner than later, and kind of professionalize what's happening. But right now, I think that we need more than ever. We need value appraisers to kind of value, and accountants to value companies and assets and all of that. That has not been really included in this conversation, and I don't think a lot of people are even thinking about the professional way of valuing an asset. But your balance sheet, your income statement, all those things do apply or will apply. At least that's my hope, that they will apply in the near term.
Yeah, and I think that's a great segue into Jason. From a regulatory perspective, how do you think the regulators will look at and view NFTs, and what are the considerations that they'll have to think about?
Yeah, so I just want to take a step back. I also want to mention something on data capturing as well. So, with Blockdaemon managing operating customer nodes, especially for institutions and large enterprises, we not only monitor the network from a security and maintenance perspective, but having the amount of data, a large amount of data, enables us to use and synthesize on-chain data as you would if you were a regular cloud operator, right? We are able to see transactions from mempools directly from the chain, from inception, as it relates to a full archive node, and data stored on any block from inception, data type, all the data that is stored, right, et cetera, et cetera. So if you go back to one of my examples, for instance, like real estate or supply chain, right, provenance, or even academic NFTs, this becomes a game changer instantly. So the data can be packaged to tell a powerful narrative. For example, you can see that, I'm just making this up, 5 million students graduated from East Coast schools during this spring semester, right? Or if we're talking about it in sense of a new movie release, right? We can see that $75 million was spent, in the box office in the opening weekend, or right? It starts to become a very intriguing and powerful narrative. And not to say that data isn't captured today, but how cumbersome is the process? Is it efficient? Is it easy, right? With NFTs, it'd be very, very efficient and very easy to capture. And then making it even more of a profitable situation, right? If you talk insurance companies and you use NFTs to tag cars with, right? Now you're really starting to show the value, the intrinsic value in NFTs, because insurance companies are going to want to use those NFTs as they're tracking cars to write policies and to drive the policies written for the customer. And so it's always a story about data, and it will remain to be a story about data. But now that story on how data is captured is evolving. And the challenge is the US government still doesn't really know how to regulate the now near, I think it's $3 trillion of the crypto market. And in there somewhere remains NFTs, right? The current US regulatory and legal framework is slowly catching up to the novel tech like NFTs. So there are still some lingering key legal issues around NFTs that need to be decided, like, for instance, how NFTs can be classified. Is it a new asset class? Is it a commodity? Or is it even a security? By their nature, NFTs can be linked to a variety of different assets and represent numerous rights and obligations, which makes them challenging to classify correctly. If you trade NFTs, like for instance, memorabilia, right, and you trade it, does it constitute as property or security? Then you have to decide on the intellectual property rights, anti-money laundering, sanctions implications, and even cybersecurity concerns, especially when we're talking, my data, Duong's data, McKenzie's data, and even you, Michael, your data is tied to these NFTs. What are the cybersecurity policies and regulations around protecting that data, right? And I think protecting personal data today is very top of mind. So the existing regulatory and legal environment was not really designed to accommodate digital assets. I think we all know that, even including NFTs. But all that to say, I think the current climate is that regulators just don't truly know, right? I think they're trying to figure it out. What I do think is, I think the government's initial thought here is that NFTs could potentially be considered a commodity through the Commodity Exchange Act. And I think what really needs to take place is that industry needs to be very proactive in saying, okay, here is why, NFTs are commodities, and here's why, and make a sound support case for it, right? I think what we've seen recently in the news with the FATF guidance is, it's very broad. Typically what happens is new guidance, new legislation will come out. It's very broad. That's version 1. Version 2 comes out. It's a little bit less broad, but still very, very broad, and so forth. And I think, industry is doing a fairly good job right now in educating the regulators. But we need to always do a better job, right? We need to really partner with them instead of it being us versus them, and help them understand why we think something is the case, right? Why do we think commodities or NFTs should be commodities, or vice versa, if they should be securities, which I do not think they should be securities. And to that end, even FinCEN has not issued guidance specific to NFTs. But it has published guidance generally about how the BSA function and FinCEN regulations relate to virtual currencies that could potentially apply to NFTs. So, one question is whether, FinCEN regards NFTs to be value that substitutes for currency. If NFTs are considered substitutes for currency, then obviously FinCEN could consider NFTs to be subject to BSA functions and FinCEN regulations.
Yeah, that's all fascinating. I think relates to the next topic that I want us to cover, which is the evolution of the NFT market and the institutionalization of the NFT market. So we have a number of people in the audience here who are institutional financial services participants. In many cases in TradFi, in some cases in DeFi. How will and should institutions get involved in the NFT space, both from an investment perspective and from a usability perspective? So Duong, let's start with you, given that you're building a bridge between those two worlds, and then we'll go from there. I'd love to hear everybody's perspective on this.
Yeah,
okay,
sure.
Thanks.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
All right. So on this institutional, how institution could be more participating, involving in the evolving of the NFT market. So I totally agree with Jason on the regulatory side. That is the majority of regulators around the world right now still don't really know how to categorize NFT and how to treat NFT. We have seen more trend towards that. NFT is not treated as a currency like cryptocurrency, so maybe they could be on the commodity side or something side less regulated. Having said that, the entire market watching, and we are watching, we are seeing how NFT is evolving and what application and use cases are going to come out of that technology. And we just cannot wait until everything is falling into place. So our point of view right now is that we will start offering the features, NFT features to the market in areas that we know are safe and not illegal. So, for example, for the innovative business model right now, GameFi, Metaverse, buying characters, item, experience game, we can represent that with NFT, and it mostly not illegal for anyone in the world. The next industry that we think NFT is going to be applied really soon is in education. In some service, digital service or real life service. So for example, you can use NFT to represent some ticket on a travel platform. You want to travel to Europe and you can buy an NFT that represents a tour in Venice. And that is, I think, that's totally fine. NFT can also be represent in some sense of the reward. Or for example, you have the reward with that, with this kind of fitness change, and you can use it to exchange for something else in another service or product industry. So I think those are the near-term use cases and kind of safe applications that we can start building right now. And further than that, as the market keep evolving and the market and regulators start to figure out what properties can be attributed to NFTs, and more legal framework can be formed around it. So from the institution point of view, I think they can participate in certain ways. The first thing is investing, right? So either investing in a venture fund that focus on NFT and crypto companies supporting NFT, or investing in the NFT companies themselves. They can also have, if they have the strong domain knowledge, so for example, is an education themselves, if they're in travel industries themselves, they can start thinking about how to do use cases and how to build like some features and use cases for NFT applying to the industry and businesses. And building in blockchain right now, I don't think is really hard. There are a lot of solutions and services that can help them build a blockchain or an NFT, and that can be totally outsourced and can be done quickly. So as long as they have the willing to go in, they think that they are in a more safe industry or more industry with less regulatory uncertainty right now, I think it can be applied right away.
Yep. And McKenzie, yeah, what are your thoughts on kind of how institutions can interact with NFTs, both investing in them, but also from a usability perspective?
Sure. Well, I think within NFTs, fractional NFTs are unfortunately going to be deemed a security, at least that's my opinion, which presents a big opportunity for institutional investors. And they can use fractional NFTs to kind of streamline what they, some of the services that they provide to their investors, and also kind of use it as an alternative to the LP, the traditional LP and LLC fund structure, and kind of bundling it with a DAO, which is a decentralized autonomous organization. And so that will really streamline your front, middle, and back office for fund administration. So I see a lot of innovations with that. And then also on the institutional financial services side, I think they'll be able to reach new markets. As I said before, they'll be able to reach new customer base and be able to offer more efficient financial services. They can establish credit. An NFT can kind of, they can give an NFT to every banking customer or every financial services customer that has their credit score on it, and then they'll be able to leverage DeFi, decentralized financial services like staking or lending. They'll be able to better serve those markets with they'll be able to better serve those markets that would not normally go into a bank or not normally go into or meet an institution face to face.
And Jason, how do you think about this? I know you talked about the regulatory perspective a little bit. How does that tie into comments that Duong and McKenzie have made, as well as kind of how you see the evolution of the NFT space, so that institutions both feel comfortable in a regulated context about engaging with NFTs?
Yeah, so I touched on this a little bit earlier, with the two-pronged approach. And I think institutions, should create their own NFT market to hedge some of the risk and minimize some of the exposure to investing in NFTs. It's hit or miss on a lot of these funky NFTs we've seen out here. So it probably makes sense to be the one minting and issuing and creating that marketplace to hedge some of that risk and get a feel for the process and overall climate, and have a company such as Blockdaemon to run and manage that infrastructure for the institutions so that they can focus on just building out the marketplace itself. And the investment will be in the infrastructure and not so much on figuring out which hot potato you should procure. Again, and the second approach would be to figure out which use case is most viable to their organization. So as I said, institutions invest in a wide range of businesses and industries. So it's very, very vital that they look and assess at, the correct investment opportunities that make the most sense to start having discussions around usability in those specified industries. I think for any of these NFT use cases, first movers advantage to the institutions providing the tech or the investment into the tech, the actual platform is going to certainly win out if it's done correctly. I think we can all attest if the home buying process and lending process or commercial leasing process or whatever it is more efficient, it's going to drive administrative costs down and thus profits up, right? It's a very, very simple narrative.
Yep. That all makes sense. I mean, I think, what advice would each of you give to those who want to engage with the NFT market? Jason, we'll start with you and go around the horn.
So this is just my personal advice. I was very into NFTs 6 months ago, and even before that. And, I think it's really important that always never invest what you don't have, right? If you're looking to get into it, go to some of the established marketplaces out there. A couple of them provide KYC and AML, you have to register. And it's good to get involved in some of these auctions just to buy some of these NFTs and hold it. There's not a whole lot you can do with it at this moment, but it's good to just get to know the process and then start looking into, if you have, a technical interest, start looking into how you actually mint NFTs. I know I have a couple of friends that are artists, and I helped them figure out the minting process, and now they're hooked, right? If that would have never happened, they would have been traditionally just pumping out canvas, plaques and providing it to their customers, which is great. But I think tokenizing all of their artwork is even better, right? And the special thing about NFTs is, my friends aren't huge artists, but it's very, very interesting to see how art has evolved into these NFTs. And it's bringing people to tech, which I really like, that normally wouldn't be in technology, right? Or wouldn't really normally care about it. So I would just say, going back on that is, be careful what you're investing in. Don't treat it as like I'm going to get rich scheme, or I'm looking to profit on these NFTs, but treat it as a learning process, right? Learn NFTs, because NFTs are here to stay and they're not going anywhere. So the more you learn and read up on NFTs and how they actually work, the better you'll be in the near future.
Great. Duong?
Yes, so NFT definitely represents an up and coming and getting bigger and bigger size of the crypto market. So I totally agree that in order to have all the flavors that the crypto or blockchain technology got to offer, you should got a hand on and just try to buy some NFT to get a feel of it, and to try to see like how NFT is priced, who's the supplier right now, what use cases NFT is for, how you can buy, you can sell, how you can move and your NFT across protocol and channels, so to get an understanding of the current status. And more importantly, definitely stay in touch with all the new development in the space, so new protocol, new technologies coming up. And try to find, again, if you are a business and you are in a certain industry, figure out if there are good use cases, good use case and application that you can build for your business, and just try to get an MVP out and see how it goes.
And McKenzie, you have the last word.
Sure. Like Jason said, educate yourself, learn as much as you can. There are many different types of NFTs in the market right now. So best to learn what you're getting into before you invest your money. Also, make sure that when you are buying NFTs, that you're buying on a blockchain network that is established and is not going to disappear. Because once that network is gone, your NFT is gone. Also, make sure that if you're going to join a community or some kind of a DAO, again, a decentralized autonomous organization that is using an NFT to raise capital, you want to do your due diligence and make sure that they are creditable, and that they're, again, are going to be around. There's not going to be a rug pull. We've had several of those happen this year with NFTs. And I think the SEC just charged a company for selling unsecured securities or unregistered securities. I think they sold like $30 million worth of unregistered securities. So be careful with the fractional NFTs. They are security. They are. And then also with NFTs, don't get in it to get rich really quickly. It's a long game. Kind of consider it a part of your retirement portfolio.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Well, thank you all for sharing kind of background on the NFT space. Hope it was interesting and useful to the audience. So I think we're going to wrap up here because we have the next panel to go.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.